You're here, I'm here. Let's get started. Today we are playing Dagon, which is a H.P. Lovecraft story in video game form. I have no clue what happens. We'll see.
I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more.
During the game, you will encounter interactive elements. Some of them will allow you to continue your journey. Others reveal interesting facts about the original short story, its historical background, and the author. Some of the trivia is hidden. In order to find these secrets, focus your eyes and look for the elder sign. I wonder, can I move? No, okay. So we can't move, but we can just look around. Alright, we found it. Now do we click on it? Yep. Lovecraft's letters. As to letters, my case is peculiar. I write such things exactly as easily and as rapidly as I would utter the same topics in conversation. Indeed, epistolary expression is with me largely replacing conversation as my condition of nervous prostration becomes more and more acute. I cannot bear to talk much now, and I am becoming as silent as the spectator himself. My loquacity extends itself on paper. H.P. Lovecraft to Reinhard Kleiner, December 23rd, 1917. Throughout his life, Lovecraft penned around 100,000 letters to his friends and fans, out of which about 10% survive to this day. But his tendency to endless correspondence was a relatively late growth. In youth, I scarcely did any letter writing, thanking anybody for a present was so much of an ordeal that I would rather have written a 250-line pastoral or a 20-page treatise on the rings of Saturn. Selected letters 1929 to 1931, H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft would often skip meals to afford postage. Collections of his correspondence have been published in various books, and selected letters can be found online. Some readers consider them his most important legacy. So we found that one. Nothing else going there. Nothing with these cans and tins. I know it wants us to go forward. Yeah, I guess this is just the tutorial phase, right?
Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below. Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death.
Let's see what we got going on. Those letters are fine. No trivia there. Oh, here we go. Morphine. Morphine entered into use in the 19th century and was routinely administered to treat severe pain during the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, and World War I, 1914 to 1918. It was also sold without restrictions until 1914. Morphine became more popular after the invention of the hypodermic syringe around 1854. Friedrich Serturner, who first isolated the substance, originally named it morphium, after Morpheus, the Greek god associated with dreams. At the time when Dagon was published, morphine abuse, known as soldier's disease, already posed a big problem in the United States.
It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider.
Lovecraft and the Great War. Dagon was written around a month after the United States entered World War I. Lovecraft was actively interested in its course. He composed many poems in which he gave encouragement to soldiers and commented on the events unfolding in Europe. He tried to enlist in the army, which he mentions in one of the letters to Reinhard Kleiner. Some time ago, impressed by my entire uselessness in the world, I resolved to attempt enlistment despite my almost invalid condition. I argued that if I chose a regiment soon to depart for France, my sheer nervous force, which is not inconsiderable, might sustain me till a bullet or piece of shrapnel could more conclusively and effectively dispose of me. Letters to Reinhard Kleiner, H.P. Lovecraft. But even though he passed the physical exam, his mother prevented him from going to the war. She has threatened to go to any lengths, legal or otherwise, if I do not reveal all the ills which unfit me for the army. I am Providence, the life and times of H.P. Lovecraft, S.T. Joshi.
The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation. So that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners.
I think there's going to be anything out in the water or the sky, but we might as well check. We've got that one to move forward. Alright, I'll go with the question mark. The Huns. The Huns were Central Asian nomads who established a dominion in Europe and invaded the Roman Empire in the 5th century AD. They were known as brutal, deadly warriors and masters of quick raids who also developed powerful composite bows, lassos, and early siege weapons. During World War I, the British used the word Hun as a synonym for Germans in order to emphasize their brutality. However, the term originated when the German Emperor Wilhelm II gave a speech to his troops on 27 July 1900 before they embarked to China. Should you encounter the enemy, he will be defeated. No quarter will be given. Prisoners will not be taken. Whoever falls into your hands is forfeited. Just as 1,000 years ago, the Huns under their king Attila made a name for themselves, one that even today makes them seem mighty in history and legend. May the name German be affirmed by you in such a way in China that no Chinese will ever again dare to look cross-eyed at a German. The refusal to take prisoners was a clear breach of the laws and customs of war adopted during the First Hague Convention of 1899. I didn't even realize that the Germans went to China. Why?
So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time.
Yes. There's gotta be something else, right? Or are things not as hidden as I think they are?
When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings.
I don't know if I would take that chance, unless you like really know navigation at sea.
Never a competent navigator,
Oh, see?
I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight.
Probably not the smartest move then.
The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land.
Oh no, they are hidden. Need to pay more attention. Return to short stories. Dagon was written in July 1917 and first published in 1919 in The Vagrant, an amateur magazine focused on the supernatural. The story is the first of his stories that introduced an element from the Cthulhu mythos, Dagon itself. A pagan cult worshipping Dagon later appears in The Shadow over Innsmouth, one of Lovecraft's most popular works. 1917 is also the year when he wrote The Tomb, a story about Jervis Dudley, a daydreamer who discovers a mysterious mausoleum in the woods by his house and becomes obsessed with it. These two works marked Lovecraft's return to short story writing after he burned most of his attempts at the genre 9 years prior and decided to concentrate on poetry. Lovecraft stated that it was his friend, William Paul Cook, a literary publisher and critic, who convinced him to start writing weird fiction again.
But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know. For my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous.
Ugh. Ugh. Interesting. The little tentacles just waving around. I don't see any symbols. Why is that one red though?
When at last I awoke, It was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished.
Yeah, with these things looking at you.
For there was in the air and in the rotting soil a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish and of other less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear.
Can't even tell what that is.
The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet.
Ah, now we look at it. Aw. Wait, hold on. I was like, oh, it's a little trilobite. Why is it upside down? The origins of Dagon. Dagon seems to be inspired by Fishhead, a short novel written by Irvin S. Cobb about unnatural affinities between a hybrid idiot and the strange fish of an isolated lake. Supernatural horror in literature, H.P. Lovecraft. And Lovecraft's dream about a strange island emerging from the ocean and him crawling in the ooze that covered its surface. I dreamed that whole hideous crawl and can yet feel the ooze sucking me down. In defense of Dagon, H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft's interest in the topic stemmed from his aversion to fish and sea smells. In his own words, I have hated fish and feared the sea and everything connected with it since I was 2 years old, but I cannot recall what earlier experience gave me such a profound and lasting aversion to the sea and seafood. The Dweller in Darkness, Lovecraft, 1927, Donald Wandre.
As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions for which innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths.
Look at that thing.
So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, straining my ears as I might. Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things.
The mystery of volcanic islands. The volcanic eruptions sometimes result in the creation of islands. Most of them are transient and erode after some time, but some prove permanent. The floating pumice, porous rock created when superheated pressurized rock is ejected from a volcano, can move across long distances and transport barnacles and other macroalgae that cling to it. In 2001, rafts of pumice created during the eruption of a volcano near Tonga, Polynesia, eventually reached Australia. I want to know more about that thing. But I guess we will... Is that a fish? It is a fish.
For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue.
Yeah, I don't know about that. If you weren't even near a coastline to begin with, what makes you think you would suddenly find one now? Not seeing any symbols though.
On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil. and set out boldly for an unknown goal.
What is that? Is that a stingray? What is that? A manta ray? I want to see that.
All day I forged steadily westward,
Ooh.
guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert.
Is that just chunks of something? Alright. Oh, well. I can't tell. Are these tentacles under the rock or coming from the rock? That's just weird.
That night I encamped, and on the following day still travelled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it.
We got this thing. These weird, wormy, segmented... I don't even know what to call them. Alright, let's see what's up here. The Horrors of the Ocean. The creator of the cthulhumythos and the fictional underwater city of R'lyeh, I'm probably saying that wrong, I've never looked up how to say it, was convinced that life could not exist at the bottom of the ocean because the water pressure would make it uninhabitable. Today, we know that the darkest depths of the ocean are home to many peculiar organisms. The deepest flying fish we have discovered so far, the Mariana snailfish, can live about 8,000 meters, more than 26,000 feet below the ocean's surface in never-ending darkness and at a hellishly crushing pressures, hundreds of times stronger than those found at sea level. Upon glancing at the modern photo of deep-sea creatures such as the anglerfish, the fangtooth, or the viperfish, and their truly Lovecraftian characteristics, it's hard not to find some irony in this.
By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance.
We got glowing lights, but only when I don't look directly at them.
An intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more.
Look at that nice moon. Okay. Why? What's going on? Why are you scared, bro?
Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again. And in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day.
Oh. Why? Why? What's happened?
Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy.
That's it. That's the only reason. Is it would have been easier to move around without the sun, like classic desert traveling advice.
Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset.
Okay.
Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence.
Good luck. The loner. Contrary to popular opinion, Lovecraft was not an ever-frowning, eccentric, grumpy loner. He considered himself to be a person who appreciated humor. Moreover, he would often meet with friends in his apartment or at various cafes in Brooklyn and Manhattan. At times, his social life was so intensive his work would suffer for months. There was a point when he finally decided he needed to put an end to daily meetings and loitering in New York cafeterias and resorted to hiding at home and reading with the main room light turned off, pretending he wasn't there whenever a friend knocked on his door. He also had another method of deterring his guests, which involved greeting them in a bathrobe with an unmade bed visible in the background and piles of paper scattered across the floor. Imagine being so popular. You gotta come up with ways to convince your friends to leave you alone.
I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me, but I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to
Wait.
illumine.
I want to look down. Let me look down.
I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night.
Yeah, maybe don't climb in the middle of the night when you can't see anything.
Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost,
Like, what if bro tripped and fell down?
and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined.
Does this mean he's just being dramatic?
Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent,
Why, though?
whilst after a drop of only a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual.
I don't know. I wouldn't be climbing down into a chasm in the middle of the night, thanks.
Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps, where no light had yet penetrated. All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me.
Just a giant rectangle. Cool.
An object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon. That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself. But I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express.
I mean, there are some pretty geometric shapes in nature. It's not totally unreasonable, but yeah, I get it.
For despite its enormous magnitude and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith, whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely.
Yeah, it's still nighttime and we're still in a hole staring at a big square rock.
The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm.
We got some water. We got some symbols on the rock. Okay, so yeah. Alright, I guess it's not from nature. Continue.
And revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions, and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith,
Alright, I hope we get to look at it closer. I want to see what's going on there.
on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures.
Nothing spooky in the water. Okay.
The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me, and unlike anything I'd ever seen in books.
How did bro... Okay, no. I was like, this thing is massive. How is he looking at the top of it? But it's a video game. It's fine. He can look from a distance. We can see it up close. It's fine. And look at a little Cthulhu in there. With sharks and snakes and crocodiles, sea turtles. Nice.
Consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world.
Ooh. What's that one? Is that... Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that one's a... What are they, a lionfish? Over there on the right? Octopus. squid, jellyfish. Okay, so he's just talking about this weird one in the middle.
but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain.
Ah, okay. All the weird animals.
It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound.
Storytelling methods. Dagon contains many themes and storytelling methods that Lovecraft developed in his later works, such as telling the story through carvings at the Mountains of Madness, the Nameless City, journals and characters' notes, the Shadow Out of Time, the Haunter of the Dark, islands emerging from the ocean, the Call of Cthulhu, or fictional beings and deities based on real events and mythologies, Migo and the Whisperer in Darkness. It's also considered the origin of the popular Cthulhu mythos. Some of Lovecraft's other stories also conclude in a manner similar to Dagon, but let's skip the details in order not to spoil the ending. I do think it's kind of fun that Lovecraft built his own universe and then he and his friends would like share stories and write fan fiction to each other.
Plainly visible across the intervening water on account of their enormous size were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a doré.
What are we talking about? The fish people? The mermaids? Are they mermaids or are they just squid people?
I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto.
Around this big old monolith, fun.
Or paying homage at some monolithic shrine, which appeared to be under the waves as well.
So the idea I'm getting from this is there's two oceans. There's our ocean, and there's the underwater ocean.
Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint. Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer.
I like how they're all a little bit different. That one's weird. I don't know how I feel about that one. That one's fine. That one's cool, reminds me of Cthulhu. That one's fine. That one, I don't know.
They were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seemed to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background. For one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe.
You thought?
Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then, suddenly, I saw it.
What are we looking at? Ripples. Oh, I gotta click. I was like, oh, the ripples are getting bigger. Something's happening. I gotta click.
With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters.
And it is. Look at that. Oh.
Fiend-like and loathsome, it darted
That
like
actually
a
made me jump.
stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith.
Whew. Need a breather there. Hold on. Like, I know we're playing Lovecraft horror, but oh. Not ready for that volume. It's got no head. Oh, we're looking at his back. Never mind. Is he standing on his tippy toes? Does kind of look like it, doesn't it? Okay, anyway, we're going mad. Let's continue.
About which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then.
Sure, probably.
Of my frantic ascent of the sloping cliff and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little.
I like how in these stories they're always like, oh, and I've gone mad. Like, they have enough clarity to be like, and I've gone mad. But I guess the idea is like they have moments of lucidity, right? I don't see anything special.
I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing.
Yeah, as one does.
I have indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat.
Aw, and all the creatures are dead. They stopped wiggling around. Here's our fish friend.
At any rate, I know that I heard pearls of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital.
How'd you get there, my guy?
Brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean.
So no more slimy ooze. You're back in the ocean.
In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing. Nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe.
I can see them chalking it up to being alone and isolated and going a little crazy. In defense of Dagon, in 1921, Lovecraft released a series of 3 essays, The Defense Reopens, The Defense Remains Open, and Final Words, later published as a collection titled In Defense of Dagon, in which he rebuked a series of criticisms directed at his works. Some notable quotes. I paint what I dream and will let the public settle the rest amongst themselves. Mr. Monday asks the I don't know French, of Dagon. I will give it, purely and simply to reproduce a mood. Its object is the simplest in all art, portrayal. The physical horrors of war, no matter how extreme and unprecedented, hardly have a bearing on the entirely different realm of supernatural terror. Ghosts are still ghosts. The mind can get more thrills from unrealities than from realities. In the essays, Lovecraft touches upon the topics of atheism, materialism, the quest for truth, and the love of science. I assume there's only going to be one in here, but we will look anyway. Nope, there's 2. The Atheist. Lovecraft considered himself an atheist and absolute materialist, which he attributed partly to his early childhood interest in astronomy and science in general. In his own words, I am indeed an absolute materialist so far as actual belief goes, with not a shred of credence in any form of supernaturalism, religion, spiritualism, transcendentalism, metempsychosis, or immortality. All I say is that I think it is damned unlikely that anything like a central cosmic will, a spirit world, or an eternal survival of personality exist. They are the most preposterous and unjustified of all the guesses which can be made about the universe, and I am not enough of a hair-splitter to pretend that I don't regard them as errant and negligible moonshine. In theory, I am an agnostic, but pending the appearance of radical evidence, I must be classed, practically and provisionally, as an atheist. Sources: Against Religion, the Atheist Writings of H.P. Lovecraft, from H.P. Lovecraft, and Mythos, The Myths and Tales of H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard, H.P. Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard. The Journalist. Lovecraft was a prominent figure in the world of amateur journalism. In 1915, he started publishing his own journal called The Conservative, which included political and social commentary, poetry, short stories, and literary criticism written by him and other authors. Howard was a skilled wordsmith, but he also took criticisms to heart, which resulted in his decision to step away from writing poetry and concentrate on weird fiction again, for the first time since his teenage years. Dagon, published in 1919, is one of the short stories written during that period. In this example, hold on, wait. I was thrown off because it says Howard, which took me a minute to realize meant H.P. Lovecraft. His name was Howard. All the rest of this time, he's been referred to by his last name, as you usually do. Alright, so Howard, I'm back, it's fine. In this example excerpt from The Conservative, the master of horror fiction explains his attitude towards warfare and the idea of world peace. Why any sane human being can believe in the possibility of universal peace is more than the conservative can fathom. Should the entire civilized world agree simultaneously to disarm, one or more nations would undoubtedly retain secret armaments and at the proper time take advantage of their more altruistic and less astute contemporaries in a wild career of conquest against unarmed victims. No country is or ever can be above warfare until the basic impulses of the human animal shall have miraculously changed. He's not wrong.
Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god.
How does he know he's talking about Dagon the fish god? I need more info. Yeah, I need more info. Dagon or Dagon was the main deity of the Philistines, worshipped throughout the Middle East as the ancient god of fertility and crops. In Hebrew, the word Dagon was a common noun for grain. The rulers of Akkad, Mesopotamia, chose him as the patron saint of their war conquests. He also appeared as the judge of the dead in an Assyrian poem and an underworld prison warder in one of the Babylonian texts. He is often mistakenly taken for a fish god due to the wrong interpretation of his name, as in Hebrew the word dig means fish. Why? If he is the deity of the Philistines and other Middle Eastern cultures, why immediately associate it with Hebrew? Anyway, in H.P. Lovecraft's work, Dagon is an underwater deity ruling over the deep ones, a humanoid race with fish traits that resides in the oceans. He is worshipped by a secret cult called the Esoteric Order of Dagon.
But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries.
Are we going to look at that book? Yes, we are. August Dereth and the Cthulhumythos. August Dereth was an American writer and anthologist. He also befriended Lovecraft and published many of his works through his company Arkham House. Although he greatly contributed to the popularization of the author's works after his death, he is surrounded by numerous controversies. One of his most questionable decisions involved introducing the good versus evil doctrine. Derleth was a devout Catholic to the Cthulhu mythos, which contrasted with Lovecraft's view of the world and his approach to cosmic horror. As a result, the author's works are often misunderstood and misrepresented in today's culture. What does that mean? Introducing the good versus evil doctrine to the Cthulhu mythos. How? What did he do? I need to know. It is also worth noting that Lovecraft was never really interested in creating a mythology, and the term Cthulhu mythos was coined by Derleth after the author left the mortal plane. I think I need to do some research after this game. What did this man do? How did he change? Alright, I'm getting off topic. Let's go. The Marketer. Lovecraft's attempts to find a job in 1925 were influenced by advice he received from friends. Among others, he started freelancing for a marketing magazine where he would write announcements and commercials. Feel free to judge his copywriting skills for yourself. From an ad for Curtis Woodwork. Curtis Woodwork embraces both the usual structural units and the cleverest contrivances of built-in or permanent furniture, such as bookcases, dressers, buffets, and cupboards. Every model is conceived and created with the purest art, ripest scholarship, and mellowest craftsmanship which energetic enterprise can command, and made to conform rigidly to the architecture of each particular type of home. The cost, considering the quality, is amazingly low, and a trademark on the individual pieces prevents any substitution by careless contractors. Source: Lovecraft Studies, Volume 7, Number 1, H.P. Lovecraft, S.T. Joshi. And go to the clock. Wonder who this is supposed to be. The scientist. These days, the word scientist is a widely accepted term, but at the time Dagon was published, it was subject to a wide debate. After the author used it in the story, critics pointed out that man of science was a more appropriate term to employ. He admitted, in defense of Dagon, that if Dagon were to be reprinted, he would indeed use the phrase they suggested. Scientist was coined as an analog to artist, to be used when referring to those studying different branches of science. Yet in the 19th and early 20th century, scientific research in Great Britain and the United States were of the opinion that man of science, resembling the term man of letters, was the only proper choice. Among other things, it was gender specific, indicating that science was an endeavor to be pursued by only one sex. The term scientist became more accepted only after World War II, and man of science started fading into obscurity as an old-fashioned synonym. Somewhere in my brain is the information on what this actually means, the difference between scientist and man of science. I know they tried to explain it here, and I can't recall it, but I think it had something to do with a woman, to be honest, which is not surprising the way this is phrased. I think some woman named herself a scientist, and that's why the dudes were like, nope, you gotta be a man of science. Something really arbitrary. I don't know.
It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. Tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease, and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men.
Lovecraft on tobacco and alcohol. Lovecraft hated tobacco, even though he used to smoke when he was 12 in order to look and feel like an adult. In his correspondence with friend Reinhard Kleiner, he claims that he quit as soon as he started wearing long pants. He also had a very strong opinion about alcohol, as evidenced by his letter to Zelia Brown, dated 13th February 1928. As for the matter of drinking, I have never tasted intoxicating liquor, and never intend to. Having a strong aesthetic disgust at anything which blunts or coarsens the delicate natural equipoise of the evolved human intellect and imagination. Drinking excited my personal repugnance, hence I don't drink. Let the herd do what they will. I am rather in favor of prohibition, the prohibition of any one antisocial force as well as of any other. Source: The Spirit of Revision, Lovecraft Letters to Zelia Brown, Reed Bishop, H.P. Lovecraft, Sean Branley, and Andrew Lehman, S.T. Joshi. Anything else we can look at before dude, I don't know, jumps out a window?
Often, I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm, a mere freak of fever, as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man-of-war.
Yeah, could have been.
This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed.
Oh, you know what this overhead view means. There's gonna be something underneath us.
Worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down into their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind.
Why you gotta bring everyone else into this? Why? Oh, okay, sorry. Context, World War I.
Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium.
What are those supposed to be in the water? Those fins. They look like... I don't know.
The end is near. I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it.
Oh, the door is moving. That's cool. I mean, you're help, dude. You got... What are these? Decorations that look like tentacles and whatnot. You don't even have a sheet on your bed.
It shall not find me. God, that hand!
Ew.
The window! The window!
The window. But if that thing was really that big, remember in front of that monolith, it wouldn't fit over here. It wouldn't fit in your apartment, eh? Come on, we're gonna jump out the window, huh? I don't know. Things seems pretty chill right now. I missed a couple. Oh well. Let's go have a read. The Piltdown Man. Lovecraft would often use the latest scientific discoveries as inspiration for his works. He would even update his stories at the last moment in order to make sure they reflected the latest breakthroughs. Unfortunately, this method was not without its flaws. After Lovecraft's death, the Piltdown Man discovery mentioned in Dagon turned out to be a paleoanthropological fraud. In 1912, Charles Dawson, an amateur archaeologist, announced that he had discovered the missing link between ape and man, the fossilized remains of a previously unknown early human. Years later, they turned out to be a forgery, but by that point, the fraud had already managed to negatively affect the early research on human evolution. In the year when the discovery took place, the majority of the scientific community believed Dawson indeed found the missing link. In 1953, Time magazine published evidence proving that Dawson was a con man. It turned out that the fossils of the previously unknown early human consisted of a human skull, the jaw of an orangutan, and chimpanzee teeth. And the elder sign. At another house where people were stirring, he asked questions about the gods and whether they danced often upon Larion, but the farmer and his wife would only make the elder sign and tell him the way to Nir and Ulthar. The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, H.P. Lovecraft. Elder sign is a protective symbol that can be found in various works of pop culture, usually represented by a 5-pointed star with an eye flame symbol in its center. For example, in games inspired by H.P. Lovecraft's writing, it is supposed to ward away all kinds of cosmic horrors. However, this is a later version of the sign created by the author's friend, writer August Derleth. In our game, we have used the original symbol as designed by Lovecraft in the form of a 6-pointed branch, which he sometimes included in letters to his friends. I wonder why Derleth got to change so much stuff. Anyway, there you have it. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I look forward to seeing you next time.